Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Certainty Talks. On this show, we talk about the system that we use to get clarity on our goals, certainty on how we'll reach them, and wealthy on our terms by rigging the game in our favor. And we share it here because we want to help you reach your goals on your terms. You've been told to scale, buy all these different products from every each way, often from good meaning people. So it's not your fault when you look around and wonder, why am I not where I want to be in business? And as our mentor, business partner, Dan Nicholson says, the biggest risk is that we don't get what we want out of life. We got my good friend and business partner here in the Whale Club, Mr. Paul Sparks himself. Not only a successful real estate investor, but also a certified certainty advisor. And if you get value out of this show, please hit the subscribe button right now. That way we can help more people become wealthy on their terms. And the title for today's show is the number one framework you need to go full-time in real estate. But before we get into that, 6-word updates. What you got, Paul?
Well, today I'm going to be stealing a 6-word update from one of our whales, Ren Bartlett, who you know well as your partners in sales leadership. And he said, closer to clarity creates peace. And I think I resonated with that really deeply. I think ultimately what I want, what success means to me is that just peace of mind in my relationships and my finances, and my energy and all these different currencies that we talk about on this show. And the closer and closer you get to clarity on what that means for you, the easier it is to get there and to filter out all the other different things. And so closer to clarity creates peace. So thanks for that one, Ren.
Yeah, no, that's a huge one. Ren's a genius in his own right, so I think that's awesome. Myself, my 6-word update: mismanaged relationships yield underperformance. And in going through the Whale Club, one of the exercises we did was building a champions list. And in building a champions list, just real quick, is here are your 50 most impactful relationships. These are your champions. These are the people that have got your back and want you to win. Right? I believe, this is going to be completely biased. I believe the best relationships, I believe that other people would pay a lot of money to have my cell phone, right? My Rolodex. For you younger people, you might not know what that means. And I'm completely squandering it, just completely blowing it, right? And so we had a quarterly strategic meeting last Thursday and Friday, and I shared with the team, like, guys, I put this list together, and I'm just blowing it. I'm just not having enough quality conversations with the most valuable people in my life. I need you guys to hold me accountable to it. And they're like, well, Steve, you've got a personal assistant. Why don't you just have her schedule a call for you every single day? I was like, why don't I do that? And so our quarterly initiative really is just, I'm going to have one meaningful conversation with a champion every single day. And who knows what that will do for business, but that's why I put my 6-word update. And it's only 4 words, right? But it's mismanaged relationships yield underperformance. I am just, I believe, at the tip of the iceberg what we can do, because I'm not even focused on those around me. I'm just so focused on just doing what's in front of me.
I think that's such a great case in point for closer versus more.
Mm-hmm.
We think that, because you brought this up, and it was a great case in point for a section that we're on right now in our community around recapture and reallocate. And we'll probably do a show here on that fairly soon, so that everybody else can get a peek inside of how to use this really powerful framework. But especially for you have such you've been doing this for 16 years, something like that. The amount of relationships that you've accumulated over that time, especially going through the champions list exercise, you realize all these people that you have in your corner.
Yeah.
But what do? We go out and it's mismanaging these resources. You don't really need more. You just need to better allocate like what you already have. And that was just such a great case in point. We all probably have enough resources to achieve what we want. We're just not necessarily allocating or managing it correctly.
Yeah. Completely just blowing it. And like you go back, and I know we're supposed to start the show, but like for me, I've always kind of joked like how I'm a horrific. I was a horrific realtor because I just had a really hard time connecting. Right, like if you bought a house with me, connecting with you, talking to you once a quarter. Hey, Paul, how's it going? How's the house? How's the kids? What are you doing for the summer? Like it just couldn't resonate because I didn't really connect with them. But my champions list, like we're rowing in the same direction. We've got the same mission, right? Like we're either real estate investors, business owners, whatever, but we're all trying to accomplish similar things. And there's so much, I'm not sure overlap's the right word, but there's just so much opportunity for collaboration or just supporting one another, or like I can help them, they can help me just very, very quickly, right? Like if I need anything, it's just, hey, no problem, I got you. And I'm not just I'm behaving like I was as a realtor, which wasn't very good. And really, I could just this activity is probably my highest, most valuable activity. I'm not doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this around how a lot of us say that we want more money, and that's actually going to be a good segue, I think, into the conversation today. Is like we want more money to be able to live the life that we want, to fund the things that we want in life on our terms and our timeline. We call that the solvable problem.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we also have this other framework that, again, if you've listened to this show, and thank you for those that listen to this show. And if you're familiar with the framework A timer, which we've talked about many times, it's just a way to sort of think through all of the different currencies that are out there. Obviously, we're familiar with money as a currency, but we use this acronym A timer to think about the other things. So A stands for attention. You can pay attention to things.
Mm-hmm.
You can be paid attention to. We have a podcast that we're doing right now. People are paying attention to this podcast. You can have time as a currency. We all say we want more time. I is impact or influence. You can make an influence on somebody positively or negatively. Money is a currency. Energy as a currency. What do you spend your energy on? What takes the energy out of you? What gives energy to you? And then, of course, we also have the R, which is relationships. So we use this to think through, because actually most of the time we say that we want more money, but money comes through one of these other currencies a lot of times. You can monetize your relationships. You can and not in a negative way. It's just what I've found, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is the better and the higher quality relationships that I have, just so happens the more money that I make.
Right. Absolutely.
The more money, the more attention you got through, and the impact you made through your podcast, well, it translated to more money in your pocket. And so we all have these big levers in our life. And it's usually money is a byproduct of one of those levers. And so I think that is what we're getting at here is you had a massively underutilized currency, which is your quality of your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're trying to get more money, we might be looking at it the wrong way by saying, how do I make more money? As opposed to saying, like, how do I continue to pour into the relationships I've cultivated over 16 years? Because that directly translates to money usually.
Oh, absolutely. It's very, very, very close correlation. So, all right. So getting back into the show. So, talking about the number one framework you need to go full-time in real estate. So a lot of times when we're talking on the show for Certainty Talks, we're talking to the business owner who's, scraped their knees, gotten their teeth kicked in, just face a lot of adversity. Today, we have other people that listen as well. And these are the people that are not quite ready to go full-time yet. And what we want to do is talk about the frameworks that someone can use to help them make this transition, if that transition makes sense for them. So what do you got, Paul?
Well, the problem is that we don't want to just, I think if you listen to the show, you know that we're not a huge fan of just burn the boats without any sort of backup plan or data or, because why? Because you're taking on a lot of risk. Well, Well, then, Steve, why do all the gurus tell us that we got to burn the boats and go all in? It's like, because it makes it easier to sell their product. That's why.
Yeah.
Because they want you to go all in, and now you don't have any choice. You have to figure this out. But that's not the case in business.
Yeah. Well, going all in is a method that works. It works. It might not have the highest success rate, right? And I think that, you know, as far as marketing filtering goes, going all in, you tend to hit the more impulsive, quick decision making people, quick starts, right? People like Paul and myself. So you say you got to go all in, we're like, of course you got to go all in. So we'll go, right? So it's just easier for them to sell products, the quick starts,
Yeah.
right? Which a lot of us in business tend to be quick starts.
Yeah, it's easier to sell the products to them. And you made a really good point there. It's not that it doesn't work. It does work. And that's the thing, is they'll point and say, see, this works. But we're not talking about whether it works or whether it doesn't work. We're talking about the risk associated with it.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
It fails significantly far more often than works.
let's tell I don't know why. I just have to tell this story again. We've told this on a previous episode, but let's play a game, Steve.
Mhm.
You want to play a game? It's this really fun game.
Of course.
It's going to cost you $10 to play. And if you're right, you're going to win $1 million. If you win the game, you win $1 million, and it costs you $10 to play.
I'm in.
Okay, great. You actually have 6 chances to play this game. And so you can play up to 6 times, and it could cost you $60. And of course, if you win, you still make $1 million. You can play 6 times. You still want to play?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. The upside's huge.
I mean,
right?
$1 million to 10.
Well,
$1 million to 10. I mean, that's 100,000 to 1 pot odds. I mean, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. And you have an 83% chance of winning this game. So your chances of winning are really high.
Yeah.
But again, what if I told you that this game is Russian roulette? And, you know, think about Russian roulette. You've got
I mean,
6.
It's a really exciting game. It just might not be the game for me.
Yeah. Well, you know, because there's 6 spots in this chamber, in this, you know, revolver or whatever, and there's only one bullet. So 5 out of 6 times you're not going to hit that bullet, and you're going to win.
Mhm.
But of course, the one time you play and you lose, there's 17% chance that you lose. It's complete total ruin, and you blow yourself up, and you can never play again.
Right.
And that's the problem, is we don't consider the risk of the game. None of us would ever play that game, even if the upside was to win $1 million. If the downside is total ruin and you blow yourself up, and then of course you're going to have all these people who like played the game and they won $1 million. They're like, no, it's a little risky, yeah, but you can still win. So
Yeah.
we
Like,
use
look,
that as an extreme example.
I'm on my jet skis. I've got my Lambo. It's a good game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an extreme example, I think, to illustrate the fact that if you're working at a job, because we all did it. Everybody most of those that are in real estate, we started somewhere else and then we transitioned into real estate. And I think we're going to just talk about the framework we use to make that transition so that we don't end up playing Russian roulette and taking on risk that could blow us up. Right? Because that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid total ruin. If you listen to guys like Ray Dalio and, you know, these expert investors, all they're talking about is how to remove risk from what they're doing. And that's what we're going to talk about today with the number one framework. And we've talked about this before. It's called the barbell framework.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everybody that's here has probably seen a barbell. If you haven't, probably need to get to the gym. Go look at a barbell.
Saw one this morning.
Yeah. Steve's getting a little buff over there. He's been working hard to drop some weight and get back in the gym. So it's showing with your arms here on the table here, Steve. So you've seen a barbell.
Yeah.
And what we notice about barbells?
Well,
you either load weight on one side or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steve, have you ever seen a barbell with weight loaded in the middle of the bar?
No, never seen
What's
one in
the
the middle.
risk to loading weight in the middle of the bar?
Well, I don't know what the risk is, but it's a lot of work to lift that barbell, right? It's not an easy lift. It's I mean, it's even hard work to get the weight into the middle of the barbell. But even if you did, it's like the difference between holding a kid that's awake and a kid that's asleep, right? When a kid's asleep, that's dead weight. It's uneven, it's bulky, right? I imagine, like if you're putting a weight in the middle of the barbell, it's like lifting dead weight. It's just
Yeah.
bulky.
The risk is it's hard to lift and it could topple over.
Yeah.
You know, it's slanted to one side. That's how I sort of visualize it. Like, how do you pick that up? How do you consistently do it? And so this concept, barbells, is not anything that Steve or I made up. This was most recently written about in a book that we've talked about many times on this show called Anti-Fragile. There's a gentleman named Nassim Nicholas Taleb who's written a whole bunch of fantastic books, The Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness. I've read several of his books, and Anti-Fragile is one of my favorites. And in this book, he talks about, this concept of anti-fragility. And I know you read that book. What does anti-fragility mean to you?
Well, it means what I thought it would mean was that you couldn't break it. That's what I thought it would mean. But that's not what anti-fragile is. Anti-fragile means you get stronger when you try to break it. Every time it faces adversity, it gets stronger. I use a ridiculous expression here, but for my anime fans, right? A Super Saiyan, right? Every time he gets hurt and close to death, he gets stronger. Mm-hmm. Anti-fragile.
Kanye, man, that don't kill you makes you stronger or something like that,
Yeah, no.
He would like anti-fragile.
Yeah, you cannot hurt him. There's nothing you can do to hurt that guy.
Well, and so he talks about this framework called the barbell framework to build anti-fragility into your life and your business. And when you read about it, he was actually referencing this guy right here behind me in my studio. It's a Stoic philosopher named Seneca. And Seneca wrote about this thousands of years ago. So this is a very old concept. And barbells is just a better, easier way to understand what they call a bimodal strategy for removing risk. Okay. Bimodal means it's either on one side or the other. So we use a barbell to illustrate that because everybody nowadays understands that. You see a barbell, you got weight loaded on one side or the other, never in the middle. And so Taleb describes this as, on one side, we want to be taking really reliable, low-risk plays, right? Because on the other side, we want to take on, I'm going to borrow from Dan Nicholson's term here. He calls it asymmetric bets to the upside. So huge upside plays, ultimate reliable plays. And what they're advocating for is we don't want to put anything in the middle. And something that's in the middle in this case would mean maybe it has a really high upside, but it also has a really high downside. So these are the types of things that can blow you up, knock you off track. It's not reliable, and it doesn't have enough asymmetry to the upside. Notice I'm not just saying upside, because what makes it asymmetrical means the upside's big, but the downside's really low. And I go back to this example of Russian roulette. You tell me, yeah, the upside's really big in that. I get that. But the downside is massive.
Grossly disproportionate.
Yeah. It's grossly disproportionate. And what do we do, Steve? Like, we as humans, we always focus on what's the upside here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say the biggest challenge, or not challenge, the biggest mistake I kept making over and over again until you and I connected was that I've always had a high risk tolerance. I mean, that's kind of like been one of my benefits, one of my advantages, is I have infinite risk tolerance. And so as a result, I'll take bets all day because if it doesn't work out, I'll figure a way out, right? But it wasn't until we connected that I realized, I can just only make bets where the upside far outweighs the downside. And if I only make those bets, yeah, maybe the upside's not as high. Maybe. But in the long run, where after time and randomness kicks in, I will be significantly further ahead because we completely discount as business owners how much mistakes cost us. Like, going back to a W-2 employee, hey, you know what? You go back, you put $30,000 into this business, right? I'm going to start wholesaling. I'm going to buy this course. I'm going to buy this coach. I'm going to use these products and this and that, right? And you're out 30K. It's no big deal, right? Like 30K is 30K. We all make $30,000 bets all the time in this business. But for us as real estate investors, or those that we're in the business of wholesaling, flipping, or whatever, we can make up a $30,000 mistake in a month.
Yeah.
Right? But as a W-2 employee, you make a $30,000 mistake, it could take you like a year and a half, right, to make up that mistake. And so for us, we're talking about, hey, if you're going to take these bets, we're not saying don't take these bets. It's how do you take these bets where upside's great and the downside is not so bad, so that if it doesn't work out, you're not completely screwing yourself. I mean, we have RJ Bates. He's one of the panelists on Pardon the Disruption. When he got into the business, the first thing he did was stroke a check for $60,000 to a large education company. It took him a long time to pay that $60,000 back. And by the way, it wasn't his money, right? It was his mom's money. So, like, talk about adversity, right? And blowing yourself up. Now, RJ made it. RJ's one of the good guys. He's one of the happy endings, right? We talk about, like, it works. Going all in, it works. But track record doesn't necessarily line up with that as well. So, we're talking about upside versus downside. You got to take into account, if it doesn't work out well, how large a bet you're willing to make, how long it's going to take for you to make it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we run the risk having this conversation like on a podcast where we're talking to a ton of people, coming across as a Debbie Downer, right? We run that risk having this conversation because everybody's like, oh, all you want to do is remove risk. That's no fun. Like, you're telling me don't go out and make money. You're telling me don't take risk. I'm saying, no, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we want to help you get to your goals with the least amount of risk as possible. We don't want you playing Russian roulette and then running the risk of blowing yourself up. That's what we're trying to do, is give you the tools that, again, people have been talking about for thousands of years. Dan talks about it in his book. This is all just about how to get there with the least amount of risk.
Yeah, we're not saying zero risk. We're saying manage your risk. Look,
right.
I still have a crazy risk tolerance, right? Like, my overhead is well over 6 figures a month. That's risky. I think a lot of people would lose sleep over this, right? So we're not saying don't take risk. We're just saying manage your risks so that when you're taking your step, when you are transitioning from W-2 into real estate, that you're aware of the risks.
Yeah, well, you've been in business for a long time. And so one of the frameworks that Dan talks about in Rigging the Game is that we don't scale until we hit predefined points. And we need multiple data points to indicate that, you didn't just go from 0 to 100K plus in overhead overnight, right?
No.
So let's talk about the person that's got a W-2, they're working a job.
Mm-hmm.
They started listening to Steve's Real Estate Disruptors, and they're like, man, and they probably read Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Mm-hmm.
a little purple book.
Everyone's read that book, yeah.
And when you learn about some of this stuff, you just can't unlearn it. You can't unsee it. It's this path towards financial independence, financial freedom, retiring early. What a beautiful concept. And I'm here to tell you, it's totally achievable. And you can get there a lot faster and with a lot less risk by going through a process and not just buying every single course and doing every single thing. And we're going to talk about that strategy like right now.
Right.
So let's talk about what the barbell looks like for someone that's working a W-2 job. It's my opinion that a job, when you're working at let's say a high paying do job, whatever, there's a lot of asymmetry to the upside in that. The upside is really big. The downside's fairly low. Again, I'm just going to assume that a lot of the listeners are here are kind of like us, where we started. Like, we got a college degree, we got some degree, we got out of school, we got into industry. You know, if you got fired from your job, you probably could go get another one.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you're not making as much as you were, but you could probably go get a different job, worst case scenario, inside your industry, inside your expertise. Maybe that's not true for everybody, but it was true for us. And let's say you're making $100,000 a year, you know, at some job, engineering job, maybe. So there's a lot of upside there, you know, with very little downside, in my opinion. But so that covers one side of the barbell. But in order to be able to leave your job full time,
upside? I mean, I look at that as the reliable side, right? Month in, month out, doesn't matter what's going on. You're making your $8,300 a month, right? You're making six figures. I look at that.
Let me make my argument. So why I consider that, because I could see why it could be on it's both an upside play and it's a reliable play.
Yeah.
But here's what I would argue is more reliable than that, because you still got to trade your time and your energy and all sorts of stuff for that. Here's what your barbell might look like as you're just working a job. You've got the job on the asymmetrical upside. On the other side, you have savings. You have your 401k. You paid off your cars. You know, you don't have a car payment. You don't have a note or anything like that.
Yeah.
You've got low monthly bills. These are all things that you can do to add reliability. It's just like cash in the bank. Your 401k is constantly being added to in a very reliable, low risk position. And yeah, I assume you could probably also fit your job on the reliable side, but I think it has more asymmetry than it does reliability when you have the flexibility to start building your side hustle, which is usually what it is at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. I put on the reliable side, and then the side hustle are all the asymmetric bets.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it happens. Whether it's on reliable or it's on upside, the point is when you go start thinking about, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you listen to Steve Trang, you're listening to Bigger Pockets, you're reading all the books. It's what we all did.
Yeah.
Well, what we've got to figure out how to do is get our reliable side of the barbell to cover our core priorities in our life, like whether that's it's probably housing, food, insurance, medical, clothing, just like food, water, and shelter is kind of how I think about it. And what we've learned by helping people, do this for a while is that most people are usually around $7,000 to $10,000 a month.
Right.
To cover their monthly nut. You're not living an extravagant lifestyle necessarily, but you're comfortable, right? You've got your comfort number sort of taken care of. And so that's where we want to start looking for ways to add to that reliability. Now, there's kind of two directions you can go, and it depends on preferences. I think a lot of times, I think there's a lot of people out there who will tell you, well, the only way to do it is to go collect rental properties. Here's what you do. You go collect a bunch of rental properties. You get passive income that can then offset your $7,000 to $10,000 a month or whatever, and then you can retire.
Yeah, you hit your freedom number.
That's what Rich Dad Poor Dad says. And again, we're not saying that that's wrong necessarily. What we are saying is that's just one way to do it.
And what we learned, what we've learned in this industry, buying from landlords that didn't want to be landlords, is that is not everyone's preference.
No, it's not everyone's preference. And a 25-year-old is going to look at this different than a 45-year-old. So if you're 25 and you're like, man, I don't like this whole job thing. I want to work for myself. I want to have financial independence, and I want to be a real estate investor. Well, one of the strategies you might look at is something called house hacking. That's just low-hanging fruit. We all need a place to live. And I started doing that. We did that twice. You buy a house and you put tenants in it. It's just not a complicated concept.
Right.
These tenants pay off one of your biggest expenses. Let's say you got a $2,000 a month mortgage. You can charge, $1,000 $1,000 a bedroom. You got 3 bedrooms. You stick 2 tenants in there. Now you're living for free.
Yeah.
So instead of needing $7,000 per month, now you only need 5.
Yeah. Well, I was
You
saying
could
the
do that
preference.
twice.
What I was saying the preference is what we're learning that is not a preference for everybody. Is that not everyone's designed to be a landlord.
Right. And not everyone's designed to have roommates either.
Yeah. Yes.
If you're 45 years old, you may not be buying a house and sticking tenants in your basement.
Yeah. You're probably
You know
not
what I
house
mean?
hacking at 45 years old. Not with a wife
No,
and
but
kids.
so what are some other ways maybe that someone in that position might be able to add some quote passive and reliable income?
I mean, one of the nice things as a person that's a high earning W-2 employee, and like we give so much grief to people in the W-2 world, and I don't know why it comes across that way. It's not intentional. But one of the great things about being W-2 is you're bankable, right? So you can buy real estate. So you can buy turnkey. Jimmy Vreeland, another panelist on Pardon the Disruption, that's his bread and butter. He sells turnkey properties to high earning W-2 employees. Another one, private lending, right? If you make a good amount of active income, you could take that money, put it into a self-directed IRA if you want to make it tax-free. You could put it into a self-directed IRA, lend it, get 12%, 18% on that money, and it just grows and compounds tax-free year over year at more than double digits pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and until you understand what your real preferences are, it's hard. There's so many options that are out there. So I'm
It
here
can
to
be very
tell.
overwhelming.
It can be so overwhelming. And you don't have to house hack. You don't have to have roommates. You don't have to flip houses. You don't really have to do anything other than be able to have trust in an operator that you've vetted, right?
Mhm.
And you can lend money to them directly. You could act as a limited partner on syndication deals. You could lend money to Steve Trang and he could go put it in his deals, and you can earn 12 to 18%. Now, let's say you're a doctor and you like what you do. Not everybody hates their job. That's the thing, is not everybody is like me, was 28 years old and just said, screw this. I'm going to figure out a way to stop working for somebody else.
Or Jokic, where
know?
it feels like a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Jokic. Exactly. That's funny. I wonder if Jokic owns any real estate. He owns horses and he does all sorts of stuff with that. But yeah, there's just not a right or wrong way to do this. And so if you're 28 years old, it might look different than 38 or 48.
But going back to saying if you're a doctor, what might make sense?
Well, so I'm working with a couple people that they like what they do. Some doctors like what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They worked a lot of time. They even if they had the ability to replace their active income with quote passive income, they would still be a doctor because they like it. They get other currencies out of it besides just money.
Well, remember Stephanie Betters, right? Another Whale Club member. She was working 5 different jobs at some point. And we're like, why are you working so many jobs? Like, I love all of them. It's like, really? It's like, she was a nurse practitioner doing heart surgery. I didn't even know you were allowed to do this, by the way, right? So she's a nurse practitioner doing heart operations, and she was making $100,000 a year, and all she was doing was work on Fridays and Saturdays. And I was like, "Why are you doing this?" She's like, "'Cause I love it." Like, do you need the money? Nope. I just like meeting with patients and making them better. It's like, yeah, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, and her timeline, just like a lot of these people, isn't I'm trying to retire from my job in 2 years, 3 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're sitting here saying, all I want is the ability, instead of having to work 50 hours a week, I just want to work maybe 30 hours a week. And so you start having a conversation. Well, what do you need in order to do that? It's like, well, I would need to supplement my income in this way. Okay, great. Well, we can work backwards. Let's say you're making $300,000 a year and you're working 50 hours. And in order to drop your hours down, it means you're going to only be making $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, you can get with $1 million, you can get 10% as a private lender, like super secure and easy. And you can add that to the reliable side of your barbell and accomplish the same exact thing.
Yeah. So as a person who, they've read the books, they've listened to the podcast, but they haven't taken action yet, how do they figure out what their preference is? How do they figure out if I like lending, if I like house hacking, if I like burrs, if I like turnkey? I mean, how do you know what you like?
Great question. And I'm going to reference another one of our frameworks called CASE. CASE stands for collect, analyze, strategize, execute. And the problem is when you're doing something new, we don't have a lot of data. We don't really know if we like it. How could you know? Because you've never done it before.
Yeah.
And this is what we mean by avoiding going all in. And, I just have a problem. I don't see the world this way, in the way that a lot of gurus see it, which is you got to just pick something and go for it. Well, that's not how I did it. When I started in real estate, I needed to try a bunch of different things. I needed to see how I liked short-term rentals. I needed to see how I liked wholesaling and flipping and raising money and developments. And innovations. I touched every aspect of real estate. Why? Because I needed to see what happened when I pressed that button. What happens here? Because I didn't want to go all in on something that I just wasn't sure was the route that I wanted to take. And now that I've pressed those buttons and I figured out I don't really like this. This one's okay, but compared to this is what I want to do. Now I'm going all in, and I'm going all in on developments. I'm going all in on relationships and raising capital. Why? Because I got to press on everything. We did a show a while back on Jenga and how you'd be a really bad Jenga player if you just walked up to the Jenga tower and just mashed one of the blocks. That's not how we play Jenga. You go and you press lightly and you find the one that's loose and then pull that one.
Yeah.
So if you're early in your career, give yourself a break. It's okay to go lightly pressing on multiple things. And the people who tell you that you can't commit to anything probably don't understand how CASE works.
Right. So are you suggesting then, like, go investigate what's involved in turnkey, go investigate what's involved in burrs, and then dabble in it, dip your toe in it? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I think that so we call this microstepping. And Dr. Jeff Spencer, who we've talked about before, he calls this soft offense. It's the same reference as we're talking about with Jenga. So the question is, okay, so let's take a look at the different options that are out there. Flipping, wholesaling. Some of these are active ways to generate active income. Some of these are more passive, like burr and short-term rentals and stuff like this. None of them are wrong. It's a preference thing, and we got to figure out which one we like. I personally believe the easiest, best way to get information back without taking as more risk on than necessary, sometimes it's just go work for somebody. Go partner with somebody. Go take less in the deal so that you reduce your risk. It might mean, hey, I want to get into wholesaling. Well, there's a couple ways you could do this. You could go start building your entire wholesaling business like I did. And I kind of found out like this doesn't really fit my preferences and my style.
Yeah.
I probably could have gotten that without losing like almost $200,000 in that business by just going to work for somebody else. I probably would have accomplished the same thing. But I was so eager to burn the boats and go all in.
Right.
So relationships, in my opinion, and the ability to build those early on as you're kind of dabbling, as you like to say, relationships are probably one of your best currencies. How do you get that? You go to meetups, you get involved in your local community, You figure out ways that you can add value to people that are doing things that you might like. Hold it as a hypothesis. Don't make it as a statement. I'm going to be a wholesaler. I'm going to be a flipper. That's very different than saying, I'm going to try wholesaling and flipping and all these different things, and I'm going to see which one I like. And the way you're going to do that is, I mean, again, this is just one way to do it. This is not right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I see relationships as the best way to kind of lightly press on things. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the key here, right, is we're talking about maximizing upside, minimizing downside. I think the first thing is don't quit your job.
Right.
Unless that's exactly what you want to do, right? That's what I did. Like, I found out about real estate sales and how much money they make. I quit my job without actually figuring out whether I wanted to be a realtor or not, or whether I enjoyed being a realtor or not. I just quit my job and became a realtor, right? In a course of 2 weeks, by the way, right? So I think that's not the way to do it. Step one, unless you figure out like you're completely done with your job and career. I think the other thing too is there's nothing wrong with collecting information. I think that we kind of harshly judge people who collect too much information. And I think that there are a lot of people that do collect too much information. But you must collect some information. You must do your due diligence and figure out, if these wholesalers actually enjoy what they're doing. Are they actually doing what they're saying they're doing? And it's hard to verify this, right? But, find out if they actually enjoy doing what they're doing, if they're having the kind of success that they say they're having. One of the great things, if you're W-2, again, you're bankable, go find out from your peers that you can post on Facebook, hey, I'm thinking about buying some rental properties. Who do I know that has some rental properties? Talk to them. Figure out what are the things they like about it, what they don't like about it. They might have connections for some lenders. They might have some connections for where to get some deals, right? But then you can find out how much they like it. Turnkey. I mean, that's turnkey, BRRRR, rentals. I mean, I think they're kind of all in the same, very closely related. So I think just who's got rental properties will probably solve that problem. If you want to fund some flips, right? You could say, hey, I'm thinking about getting real estate. Who's flipping houses right now? Once you get a couple people saying, hey, I flip houses, great. What lenders are you working with? Can I talk to them, see how much they like lending? What does lending actually look like, right? So you can get some information from people that are doing it. Now, you're going to get some people that can be really mean and say, I refuse to let you come pick my brain. I, unfortunately, am one of those people, right? I actually charge for that. So if you want to pick my brain, there's an actual cost associated with it. I don't want to be that way. It's just the reality of my life and business today. But I can also say when I was starting up, I would talk to people that were having success. And I just take them to lunch. Hey, what do you do about this? What do you do about that? What do you like about this? One of my mentors is Russell Shaw, one of the most successful realtors of all time, right? Like, you can't even make an argument if he's not, one of the top 50, potentially top 10. Took him to lunch. Just talked about business. He's like, oh yeah, I spend $100,000 a month on marketing. I was like, oh my God, how do you do that? To which he said, the same thing you said, Paul. I didn't start at $100,000 a month. My first commercials were free. He worked as a script writer at the radio station. In return, instead of getting compensated, he got to do radio ads for free as a realtor. So he worked, and he bartered. Instead of getting paid to do comedy scripts, he got to do radio spots on the radio. And then that's how he found out, hey, radio advertising works. I can do more radio advertising. And that's how he built and funded his entire career. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I kind of went on a rant there, but I think there are some different avenues you could look at as far as collecting data.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great story. It's like what he did is he figured out how to get information
Mhm.
without having to spend a whole lot, without having to take on a whole lot of risk. That's excuse me, an asymmetrical bet.
That was an asymmetrical bet. I write comedy scripts. I get free radio ads, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, I wrote comedy scripts for free.
You know, and what's the downside to showing up to a local meetup? You spend an hour, I guess. Maybe you feel a little bit like a newbie, a
Hmm.
little out of your comfort zone, I suppose. That's the downside.
Yeah.
The upside is you run into somebody that might change the trajectory of your life.
Right.
You want to get into real estate, going after Steve Trang and saying, "Hey, can I partner with you on a deal?" It's probably not the, you know, it's probably not going to work. You're probably going to have to go like put in the reps, go to the
Hmm.
meetups. You have to bias towards action. We're not advocates of analysis paralysis. No
No,
way.
not at all.
You know, you have to bias towards action. But what we're saying is, what's the smallest action I can take that can give me some feedback to justify taking the next action or the next step? So, and then when you realize, hey, maybe there's something to this turnkey thing, maybe there's something to this wholesaling thing. Okay, great. You got some feedback, you collected some information, you think that you might like something. Again, I would ask you the same question. What's the smallest step I can take in order to continue justifying taking the next step? So we're biasing towards action every single way, but we're just breaking it down into smaller steps.
Yeah.
Why? So that way you reduce risk.
Yeah. It's that expression, right? Slow down to speed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jake McKay said that this week, and we used to say that is slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Right.
Um, you want to go fast, well, you got to go smooth first, you know.
Yeah.
And again, there's going to be a lot of people out there who tell you it's going to be a hard 2 years. That transition takes time
Mhm.
to go from your W-2 job into full world, and maybe you know exactly what the strategy is that you're going to do. In my case, or in that case, I would say that's great. Continue to micro step it, continue to get some feedback, because what you think now and what you know now is going to change as you get more and more information about real estate
Yeah.
investing.
I mean, as you collect more data, there's no way you don't assess or reassess your understanding of the situation, right? And what was it? Dr. Jeff Spencer said, like, we champions assess. Champions always, evaluate the landscape. I think
Adjust to reality is how he says it.
just
Yeah.
reality. There you go. Like, I think just put another way, talking about going all in, right? Like, let's say Paul calls me like, Steve, I'm thinking about getting the MMA. Like, cool, you got to go all in. Like, call Dana White, schedule a fight this weekend, go all in. No one would do that, right? You would figure out who your buddies is in martial arts. You'd figure out the training regimen. Where are the gyms close by? What does it cost to join the gym? Right? How much time do I have to spend into it? How much am I going to spend for equipment? You wouldn't just sign up for a fight,
Right.
right? Marathons. I mean, I think some people are crazy enough to just like sign up for a marathon with no training, but typically you want to figure out, like, can I do a 5K? Am I in shape for a 5K? Can I run a mile straight? I can tell you, when I first started running a few years ago, after my doctor said I was obese, right? He was not the nicest doctor, right? I Running a mile was not something you just did. Like, we had to work it up, right? Can I run a quarter mile without stopping? Then it was a mile without stopping. And then it was 2 miles. And then eventually I could run a 5K without stopping, right? But I wouldn't just sign up for a marathon and go all in. You got to, in that case, literally microstep it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. We'll have to keep that one in the Rolodex of just examples of microstepping. We've all heard these examples. We've observed it in other areas of our life. All we're suggesting is, consider applying that if you're looking to go from your W-2 full time into real estate. Use a lot of the same strategies that have probably made you successful in other areas of your life so far. And the barbell framework is just a helpful visualization tool. So if you're listening to this, let me give you some practical ways you can implement this. Take a piece of paper and draw an actual barbell. Like I draw, the barbell. I'm doing this with my hands. If you're watching live, if you're just listening, just picture a barbell in your head, and I want you to write out the things on the reliable side. What do you have in savings, 401k, pay off cars, just things like this that you already have. It's like, it's in the vault, it's in the bank kind of thing. Then of course you've got your other plays where you're making big chunks of cash that also have low downside. In my opinion, a job fits that. It also fits on the reliable side. Going to work for somebody else that is already doing what you're trying to do. You're not taking on a ton of risk by joining somebody else's wholesaling team to see if you like it.
Right.
You're not taking on a ton of risk by partnering with somebody, bringing cash to the table, maybe with someone who's already operated turnkey rentals or has done flips, and you can bring money to the table and learn from their experience to see if they like it. We do the same thing with developments. I have people who are doing the same thing with me right now. And you can do that. Most of that comes through relationships, watching another YouTube video, reading another book, like that only gets you so far. I'm here to say I read all the books, I watched all the podcasts. It is really helpful, and you should be definitely consuming that content. It'll help you get more and more information. But at a certain point, you've got to bias action. And the best way to take action, in my opinion, is to take micro steps. Take small steps forward that have really high upside, like going to a meetup. The upside is tremendous. The downside is really low.
Yeah.
Right. We want to look for opportunities like this, and we want to take things out of the middle of the bar where you're taking on a lot of risk for a huge upside. Those are just bets I think we want to try to take off the table and either try to keep it asymmetric, where again, we a lot of times it's just about how do we take the risk out of this. Well, maybe work with somebody else that's already done it. That's a great way to take risk off the table.
Yeah, and there's been so many people that we've had on the Real Estate Disruptors podcast who said they started by going to a real estate investor association event, right? Jack Bosch was on the show a couple of months ago, right? He said he was number 2. His wife was number 2. He was number 3 as far as like member of the Arizona RIA. Mm-hmm. He built his whole empire. He started at a RIA, right? I think his upside, a lot of people would love to have what he has. Mm-hmm. Downside, what, $80 a month for a RIA? Upside, you can meet people that will change your life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this isn't meant to be rocket science. Again, if you're listening to this, it's simple, not easy. So just know that we all went through it, and it can work, burning the boats and going all in. If that's your preference, like, I'm not here to stop you. What we're here to say is this is what people for thousands of years have been talking about, how to get what you want in life with the least amount of risk. I don't think we want to take more risk or put more effort than is necessary. And oftentimes when you're starting to make that transition from full-time W-2 to full-time investor, you don't really know what you like. You don't know what your preferences are. And so it's okay to take micro steps and play a little Jenga with this, right? Try a few things. Give yourself some grace for a year, 2 years, 3 years to press on some of these opportunities, because when you do have the data and you're like, no, this is exactly what I want to do, then you can go all in knowing that you're making a choice that's going to help you get closer to what you actually want in life, which is, again, what my 6-word update today was: closer to clarity creates peace.
Yeah.
I think we got to have clarity on the steps we're taking.
Absolutely. And I think just going back, right? Like, Paul and I are both quick starts. We're not against massive action. It's not that. What we're saying is it's better to have a bias towards action and slow down. Just slow down a little bit, because the mistakes you make aren't necessarily, going to ruin you, but it takes so much time and energy and resources to recapture and make up missteps, right?
Yes.
So if we can just minimize the missteps, you can go much further a lot faster. You know, again, Keith Cunningham is someone I've quoted before as well. Paul, you go back to your career and you can undo your 3 largest financial mistakes. How much further along would you be?
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty
That's all we're
much
talking about
further,
here.
I would assume. Yeah.
That's all we're talking about here, right? If we could just limit our mistakes, not make no mistakes. We could just limit our mistakes or limit the consequences of our mistakes. We would be much further along than where we are today. So, with that said, you know, I think for those of you guys that are listening right now, you know, if you are interested in learning how to implement a reliable, profitable, and fulfilling business, you know, Paul recommends, just go by rigging the game. It's going to cost you like $10. I think riggingamazon.com takes you there. Go check out the book. And if you enjoy the book, Paul has actually been working with Nick and Dan for better part. Is it 2 years now? Or is it a year and a half?
About a year and a half. Yeah.
About a year and a half, right? So he's been working directly hand in hand with these guys, and they're business partners with us in the Whale Club. So if you have any questions how Paul and I are actually implementing it as well after you read the book, go to realestatecertainty.com, you know, schedule a call, figure out, you and Paul can talk about how we can implement some of these principles, these frameworks, the language into your business today, and, you know, maybe help you just get a little bit more clarity. So,
Yep.
Anything else before you want to wrap up?
I don't think so. I think we covered it. Yeah, good show today.
Yeah, great show. Great show. So thank you guys all for listening, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.